Today, the Jamesdonkey RS2 3.0 is on the desk for review. This is an 1800 layout keyboard that comes pre-built or as a bare bones for less than $120 and on the surface offers an appealing package. So let's take a closer look and see if it's as solid as its paper spec indicates. A huge thank you to Metkeys for sending the Jamesdonkey RS2 3.0 over for us to take a look at today. No money changed hands, and all opinions remain my own. Neither Metkeys or Jamesdonkey have been privy to this content prior to its upload. Metkeys also provided us with a discount code for when you shop with them. Make sure you check out with the code listed on the screen here for a 5% discount on your order. And as always, chapters, as well as links for everything seen in today's video, as well as links to our socials and the Discord, are down in the video's description. This board didn't get off to a great start with damaged interior packaging and loose switches, but not damaged exterior packaging. That indicates that not only was there an issue during packaging, but an issue with the packaging. I might recommend a revision here to help ensure the switches stay planted in the plate during transit, like a more form-fitting, precisely molded dust cover that's taped down to the case with a tape that doesn't leave residue. Thankfully, none of the switch pins were bent and I could reseat everything. If something like this happened to your board, let me know in the comments below. To be clear, I don't think this was a Metkeys thing. Design-wise, the case is a fairly standard wedge with some angular accenting in the side profile and a really tall front height of around 21mm off the desk with a reasonably steep typing angle, though I'm unsure of the spec. The bottom case and rotary knob are where you get some color accent on the board, in this case a light blue. Branding is kept to a minimum and it's thankfully in a spot that I'm kind of okay with here. The only other visible logo on the outside is this strange graphic here. Gotta admit, I have no idea what this is, but it looks kinda cool, so I'll take it. The rotary knob works for both volume and LCD screen control, which we'll get more into in the software section. In terms of layout liberties, they've opted for a less collapsed version of this layout to provide the numpad with a 2U0 key, something I've had enthusiasts express as an issue they have with typical 1800 layout boards, and they find themselves hitting the right arrow key more often than not. This also allows for a cluster of 4 keys between the alphas and numpad, reclaiming some of the physical switches lost to the rotary knob and screen. We got a pre-built model with double-shot PBT cherry profile keycaps in a matched blue-on-white colorway. Legends look really good, texture's really nice. No complaints on these in terms of overall quality. Stock switches are Gateron Pro Silvers, a speed switch that actuates at 1.2mm of travel and has an elongated stem for early bottom out to balance. This lends itself well to gaming-centric performance, so it's interesting they opted for this switch in something like an 1800. We've also got some plate-mounted stabs with good fitment tolerances and serviceable factory lube, but we did end up retuning all of them with some 205 grade 0. The board does technically support PCB mounted stabs, but given how the stock stabs tune, I'd say stick to plate mounts for this board. Now let's take a listen to how the RS2 3.0 sounds stock before we get into other features and the teardown. It's admittedly a little bit on the thin and quiet side, although for something like an 1800 layout board that's being used in, say, a professional workspace, that might not be the worst thing ever, in that it would provide a nice balance of a board that makes sound but isn't overly boisterous and irritating to those around you. Of course, we did opt to rebuild this board with our own parts, so let's get into what we found and what we ended up with. They seem to want you to disassemble the board, or at least expect it to happen at least once, as they provide you with a special magnetized tool to unscrew the case fasteners, which are easily accessible from the bottom of the case. While we're here, we can also see they picked a great spot to house the 2.4 GHz dongle when not in use, something the Ala F75 could take some notes on. Also at the back of the bottom case is the slightly offset USB-C port and wireless mode switch. The board is relatively easy to disassemble, only requiring 8 fasteners to be removed. I do recommend lifting the PCB and plate assembly out with the top case to avoid damaging the cable for the screen. There's 3 cables running to different parts of the board. The aforementioned LCD cable, one for the board to the daughter board, and one from the battery to the daughter board. All cables have ample length for what they're connecting, and none of them are ribbon style, so I'm generally pretty happy here. The bottom case has a sea of thick silicone resting in it, and to remove it, you also need to remove the daughter board, but you can leave it in if all you need to access is the 4000 mAh battery. Gasket material is shockingly soft, thick, and spongy, and they just sit in the top and bottom case, lending the entire plate and PCB assembly a pleasant and even amount of bounce throughout, balanced by the FR4 plate's naturally moderate rigidity. Here's where the board committed a few sins, at least as I see them. First, the board uses these stupidly cheap plastic plate standoffs for the PCB and plate assembly, of which one of them literally disintegrated on just disassembling the board the first time. I'd really like to see more robust QC controls for fastener torque on these, as well as more robust standoffs being included. Pulling the plate and plate foam is where the PCB itself shows the next sins. If the PCB hadn't gone with this strange proprietary hot swap socket design, this actually would have gotten an okay assessment from me. But they did. If anything happens to any one of these hot swap sockets, congratulations, you got a big ol' hunk of e-waste. Then there's the PE foam layer that's not only glued to the PCB, but is thin and annoyingly fragile enough that attempting to remove it could result in the destruction of the sheet. Admittedly, those two things kinda give the PCB a failing grade for me. Yes, the rest of the trace layout and the design appears to be fine otherwise. I just can't forgive going with a proprietary hot swap socket design in lieu of the proliferation of awesome hot swap sockets out there that are also user serviceable in the event something does go wrong with one of them. Also, can we please stop gluing the PE foam to the PCB? Rebuilding the board demanded some parts to drive a fuller, louder sound based on personal preference. To that end, we installed some Ducaro MO Green V2s and topped things off with MT3 Operator. An interesting decision given the front height of the board, and one that many of you may have to take some time to get used to if you try this for yourself. But personally speaking, I think it was the right choice, as the board looks and sounds much better than before. Huge thank you to Drop for sending Operator over for us to make content with. We also left all acoustic treatments installed. Now for the software. I've provided a link in the description to take you to it in the event you have a hard time locating it, because the software allows you to remap any key on the board, including function layers. Unlike PAW65, this software doesn't appear to interfere with rotary knob control. This is an interface I suspect several of you have seen before with slightly different branding on your keyboards, and it also shares some visual cues with another board we'll be taking a look at in the near future. It also grants control of the LCD screen on the top right, allowing you to upload your own animations to display. Alternatively, you can use the onboard controls to move over to other controls within the screen, as well as the core display that shows you date, current state of battery charge, current time in a 24-hour format, and the current lock states and connectivity being used. It's a very densely populated display for being so small, but its presence on a board this inexpensive is encouraging to see, and it's surprisingly easy to read everything. This is a board I didn't expect to end up liking like I do, but it's definitely got some issues to address before I can make this a hard recommend. QC and packaging needs to improve. First impressions matter a lot, and this made one of the worst ones I've had yet. Poor QC and packaging led to not only several switches not being seated properly, but one of the very cheap plate standoffs disintegrated just from uninstalling it for the first time. Then there was the proprietary hot swap socket design on a PCB that has the PE foam glued to it, making the foam a requirement and the board e-waste if a socket fails. If Jamesdonkey can fix these things, then even the underwhelming stock typing sound is redeemable in the face of an otherwise thoughtful, feature-rich, and well-built platform that's doing things at its price that continue to signal that the entry-level's time in the spotlight has properly arrived. Given the naming convention, Jamesdonkey isn't opposed to revising these boards, so I'm hopeful things will improve for the next iteration as there's really good meat on these bones. If they do, this would be a really nice full-size adjacent keyboard at an attainable price. Even with those shortcomings, this is still a decent board for a first-time build, or someone who wants to try an 1800 layout but doesn't want to spend a ton to do so, with solidly implemented features and software and a very comfortable typing experience. Thanks so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit the like button on your way out if you like what you saw, get subscribed and hit the bell icon, and check the links in the video's description for everything seen in today's content. While you're at it, here's some other content for you to peruse. Take care of yourselves and one another, and we'll see you next time.